Thank you all. Thank you. So thank you all for being here this evening. We got a full meeting. So I also hopefully you guys packed your patience because we got a lot to cover. I'm going to turn it over now to Miss Danielle Seward, who's going to just lead this meeting and guide us. You're on.
Okay, I'm very excited about this first policy committee meeting of the year. So welcome to all. On today's agenda, we have 5 policies to discuss with you. 2 are in the business administrator's shop, and we have with us Mr. Jeff Cuff, who will be leading us through these 2 policies. Food services, which is just an update on some language changes. And then we have a new policy, which is policy 610.1, which I've numbered that because it falls under procurement services for business diversity in procurement and materials and contracted services, I'm sorry. Then the second batch are 3 policies that fall under school safety, which falls under the Office of Student Services. But the individual division is the school safety department, which is under the leadership of Mr. Gary Ricards, who will be leading us through those policies. Well, actually, we'll be tag teaming through those. So as we always start with our review and our purpose of doing this work, the purpose of this is to make sure that our policies align with our current district needs, that everyone has a shared understanding of the policy and the purpose of that policy, and that we are supporting the efforts of Focus Forward 2025 strategic plan. I was trying to take us back in time. So with the first, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that the presentation link is also put into the chat. So if that can be handled, that would be great. So individuals can follow along. Thank you.
Absolutely. Mary, I'm not sure, do you have a copy of this? I believe you do because I sent it on Friday.
Okay, I'll post it.
Okay, thanks. So for the first one, food services, again, these are minor changes, word language and word changes and additional language around community eligibility provision. And so without further ado, I will make this bigger so it's easier for everybody to see it on the screen. And Mr. Cuff, would you like to lead us through this policy?
Sure, thank you very much. I'm not going to read through this. I think everyone had a copy of this, so you can see the purpose is there. It's, as we provide food service for all of our students, basically goes through that everyone should get a fair and nourishable meal. A lot of our standards are guided by the Department of Agriculture, and particularly since we are a CEP district. CEP is Community Eligibility Provision, which a lot of everything that we do is governed by the USDA. So it goes through this policy, which has been in place for a while, of what we do for our students, how we have to provide food. It goes through the state that basically we delegate the responsibility. Superintendent delegates it to myself as well as the food service director. For the most part, it covers all the cafeteria stuff. There's some verbiage in here as well that covered in case a student turned away if they had insufficient funds or had a run up a debt. But again, that does not apply to us because we are a CEP district. And as you scroll through and you probably get a little further down, they did add some language in there for CEP down there. And it gives you a little description of what it is. And I kind of went over it quickly, but you can read it at your own leisure. And it goes through, no one should be turned away. Then we also get into the dietary needs of the kids, make sure that no one gets turned away, that we and provide a good meal for everyone. So I know I went through it quickly. Again, this is an old policy. It's the only update was the CEP wording. So I know I went through that quickly. Is there any questions on that or anything that anyone, when you reviewed it, that stuck out?
And there were other minor changes like the shall that they added here and the or school staff that they added here. And I believe that was about it. So I'm just, were there any questions, comments, or concerns about this policy? Oh, and again, there was this note here. That we did add a note here as we were reviewing it, myself and Mr. Cuff, that this doesn't apply to our district because we're a CEP district. So we left it in here so that you could see it, but we had reviewed it. And that's about it for that one. Are there
Any
any-
questions?
Hearing none. Okay, I will go to the next one. So this next one is a new policy that we're proposing that would support minority and women-owned business enterprises in our community. And the purpose of this policy is for us to promote equity, an equitable opportunity to do business with the William Penn School District under contracted awards, and to take proactive steps in supporting and growing businesses in our community. So without further ado, I will open it up and I'll make it a little bit bigger so it's easier for everybody to see. And Mr. Cuff, would you like to take us through this policy?
Sure, thank you. So as Danielle stated, the purpose here is to make sure that we promote equitable opportunities for all, that no one is either cut out or shunned away from a procurement opportunity, whether it be for goods, services, supplies, or anything of that nature. So this is governed by the Pennsylvania State Code. Again, just as other policies are, the board is authorizing the superintendent to, in a business office, develop a procedure to basically require and to advertise to get more diversity and inclusion in our procurement practices. And this is what this is about. This is about making sure that we get people to become part of our procurement practices. So you'll see that if you go down to the mandatory regulations, there are steps there that we're going to put in place that we advertise, and we try to advertise to get MWBEs involved in our procurements. Also requiring vendors to make sure that they adhere to our policies for equitable distribution, has anti-discrimination policies. Also will make sure that our vendors take good faith practices with not only with them, but also with some of their subcontractors as well. So that's another way that we have some type of authority over what we do and who we offer our procurement services, or procurement opportunities to as we move forward. And again, I know there's a lot of wording in there, but the major gist of what we're getting here is that we're going to promote to have in a full range of involvement and open opportunities up for everyone to be involved in our procurement process. So I'm going to stop there because there's a lot of wording there. I know everyone had the chance to read it. Are there any questions that come up or any thoughts or ideas?
I'll go back up to the top.
I apologize. Yeah,
No,
thank you.
I mean, just in case somebody has something at the top.
I have a curious question.
Mhm.
Yes, ma'am.
Are other school districts in Delaware County, do they have similar procedures, or are we the first, if you will?
Great question. So I did send a poll out last week to the other business managers in Delaware County, and no one responded positive. There wasn't 100%. I had about half of the business managers reply. Of those who replied, the answer was no, they do not have this in place currently.
So we're trend setting. Thank you. That's good news.
I have a question.
Jeff. Oh, go ahead.
Yes.
Jennifer.
Oh, you can go, Mr. Ray.
Go ahead. Well, you can go ahead.
Okay, has this been reviewed by the solicitor?
Not yet.
Thank you, Danielle.
Again, not yet. The process for this policy is that we wanted to do a draft. We wanted to run through it with any changes, comments, questions from the board. and then take all of those comments into consideration and then give it to our solicitor for him to review with everybody's input already included.
Great. So my second part of my question is, it says authority, the Pennsylvania Public School Code authorizes the board to adopt policies and procedures. Is that just that's a blanket statement?
Yes,
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That is all. Nice work.
thank you.
Jeff,
Yes, sir.
are we including any percentages that we expect to be, higher? We can say we put a policy together, but are we including percentage?
Well, that's something we're going to work on. So if you read, a lot of this says that we will be either a policy or a procedure. So we're going to work on that in our procedures. And again, it doesn't exclude anyone, but what we're doing is we're encouraging, the purpose of it is to encourage participation. But we can have that conversation, and we can put that, and we can have that in there as we move forward.
Okay.
I think the careful thing to do is not to restrict or tie us so that we can't make other moves.
Okay, I'll get back to that. I'll get back to that, not today, but I'll get back to it in the very near future.
No problem.
Now, I know that we have a no bid contract that you have that we don't have to bid out. I forgot. I think you and the superintendent have no bid. What is the ceiling for your no bid contract? I forgot what it was.
I'm not exactly sure. So let me rewind a little bit. So as you procure, so you go through procurement. So there's the procurement guidelines for the state and there's a separate one for federal. They kind of overlap, some are similar. So with anything with school state, anything over a certain threshold, I believe it's $19,000, you're supposed to have multiple quotes or proposals is what you're supposed to get over a certain threshold. I believe it's $19,000. Now, that goes for tangible items. Let's say, for example, if we're buying desks or we're buying equipment or something of that nature. Now, if you're doing a service, that the same guidelines do not come into place, i.e., for example, if you're contracting out for, let's just say you're doing a consultant work or something like that, those you're still encouraged to have a quote, but it's not mandatory. But for tangible items, you're supposed to have a quote. Now, also in the procurement process is that as you go through this, if you're dealing with federal money, you cannot, you're encouraged to open it up to everyone, but you cannot exclude. Federal is very, very, very strict on what your procurement process is and who you provide vendors to. Now, also in the procurement process is they have what they call cooperative agreements or pre-purchasing. For example, there's CoStars, there's KPN, there's PEPM. And what that is where the state will go out or nationally they'll go out and they'll actually bid out the items for you already. So for example, if we were to go look to do something and there's something on the CoStars list or the PEPM list, as long as you go with a vendor that's already been pre-selected through that group, they have actually went through and done the bid process. So that way within the procurement process, you don't have to go out and do the quotes, you don't have to go out and do the bidding because it's already been done for you on a state level or a federal level. So does that help? But typically what we've done, anything over $3,000, we try to get quotes, is what we'll try to do just to make sure we get the good items. I mean, the best pricing out there. But again, if you're in an emergency situation and you have a vendor who is on the cooperative purchasing agreement, you are allowed to use them to make your purchases if you're up against time and you have to get something in an emergency case, emergency situation.
So Jeff,
Yes,
based on,
ma'am.
I was trying to keep notes based on what you were saying. Can you just take a gander at the comment Oh, I'm sorry. I'm gonna add the comment now so you can see it. To let me know if I've captured it correctly.
Okay. Well, we'll get quotes over 3,000. We don't go for bids.
Okay. I'll
We'll
edit
get
that.
quotes is what we'll do.
Okay.
And typically what you'll find, Mr. Wright, in most districts, what they do is, and particularly with services, they'll go with an RFP, request for financial proposal. Because keep in mind, a bid, so you have to be very careful now, a bid will tie you to the lowest bidder. And sometimes that's not the best solution that you want when you're bidding out larger ticket items. So sometimes they'll use an RFP where you have the option to interview the vendor, interview them. You can do further negotiations. You can drop the RFP, that you can drop the price down if you would like. So there are different options that you have out there. But that's why a lot of people are really careful with the bidding process. Because in theory, if you put a bid out there, particularly for the money, you have to go with the lowest responsible bidder. And sometimes that's not the best bidder. So sometimes you always maintain that right to reject all bids and go back out again. So hopefully that helps as well.
Are there any other questions, comments for this item? Okay.
So just as I'm going to rewind where Danielle started. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the comments from here tonight. We're also going to expand out. Danielle actually did a great job of searching. We're starting to search out other districts to see what else we can find outside of Delaware County and somewhat outside of Pennsylvania to see what we can find. So we're trying to find districts that kind of resemble us in size and shape and see if we can find some other items out there that we can bring into procedures that would help us going forward. So again, once we do that, we'll take it over, turn it over to solicitor, then bring it back to the committee for a final look over.
So Jeff, I'm sorry, I'm in the middle of driving and I want to share something or ask something. So and I didn't get a chance to read the entire proposal. The component that I'm really looking at is if we do not have a bidder who qualifies or bidders, for example, we put in our RFP and no one comes back with maybe or anything like that. Are we stuck in a position where we have to go back out and rebid, or are we taking what's on the what has been submitted and moving forward? I'm not saying that is the case. I'm just saying, what if that happens? How do we address that? Secondly, if we, for whatever reason, we pick a vendor that fits the criteria we're looking for, but they have little to no incorporation, how do we ensure that they have that within, or how do we help them get additional partners? Is that part of the process, or has that been worked in?
It will be. That's something we had discussed. Danny and I quickly discussed that as far as options going forward. But let me go back to your first question. So with a bid, so I know that sometimes some school districts put wording in there that they have the right to reject all bids. So that's something we will work with our solicitor on. And just for the case that you brought up, for example, we may go out and the bids may be up, and it may not be a responsible bidder, or it may not be, maybe it may be over our budget. So we have that right, and I believe so. We'll double check with David this that we have the right to reject bids and then rebid again. Okay, but no, to answer, but back to your second question, yes, that's something we can discuss. I know that, so I went back and looked through some of the paperwork the last time we had a project here, and I saw that one district at that point had actually worked with a third-party company who went out and worked with the vendors to make sure that they went out, that they had minority subcontractors, that they had minority suppliers, and that was something that they had a company that they worked with to do that, because at that point, I don't think the district was in a place to handle those type of things. So that is another option that we can bring to the table at a later time.
Okay, sounds good. I just wanted to make sure we had something in place for those situations and those kinds of eventualities.
Yes.
Now, regarding services for that, if we do put an RFP for services, I'm sure there's some way that we can work that in. Is that correct?
Yeah, more flexible from what I've always experienced and what I've always had the conversation with my peers. You've had more flexibility with the RFP process and to incorporate things like that.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
No problem.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, hearing none. Thank you, everybody, for your comments on this item. And as I do want to mention, as Mr. Cuff said, we will be taking this back to David Kahn, and we will be presenting it at our October meeting in its final state for, a final review. So just keep in mind, this will be coming back in October. All righty, thank you, Mr. Cuff. And now we turn to Mr. Gary Ricards, our supervisor for school safety. On our first policy, this is a brand new policy we have not had before, so all the language is brand new. And I will increase it on our screen so that everybody can see it okay. And Mr. Ricards and I will be tag teaming on this, but Mr. Ricards, would you like to start?
Yes, good evening, everyone. Hope everybody's having a safe evening. I'd like to take this time to introduce the threat assessment policy to us. The purpose of this policy, the board adapts policy to address students' behavior and it kind of indicates threat and safety for the students with the authority for the board of directors, the superintendents and the designee. The definitions, the behavior safety providers, which includes crisis intervention, psychiatric hospitals, things of that nature. Also, we want to talk about our individual management plan. That plan develops for students who's referred to for threat assessment teams. Also, when we go to threat assessments, it's a fact-based process for assessments and intervention for students. The threat of safety for their students and security and school employees.
So I'm actually going to stop right there and ask if anybody has any questions about these sections that he's gone through to begin with. I would like to add that many of the things that are highlighted in this policy are currently in place. For example, the behavioral service providers, we have that with Holcomb Behavioral Health Systems through our SAP process. So I just wanted to highlight that some of the things that are in here are already in place in our district. No, hearing none, I will keep it moving. Mr. Ricards?
Delegation of responsibilities. Superintendent designate the consultation of safe school safety. Superintendent shall designate members of the team leaders for threat assessment teams. And it's just to talk about the safety, the mental health safety of our district, or from our students' perspective, with the special education, school administrators, and members of our student assistant programs. I'd like to go down to the guidelines and training, I'm sorry. We've had a lot of training in this situation with the threat assessment team members, and also our SSOs have been trained at Act 667, which is a 40-hour, 5-day training, which was tested out to be certified. It's identifying, avoiding racial, culture, and disabilities, confidentiality requirements under state and federal laws and regulations.
Now, this last part, which we have highlighted that we reviewed, these parts are optional. It's basically a lot of training that we would do if we were to include this. This would be SAP training, which is 3 days. Suicide awareness, which is already a part of onboarding and requirements for all staff in our school district. Trauma-informed approach, which we currently are providing through Lakeside. Safe to say something procedures, which you're actually going to see in a couple of minutes, because PSBA actually provided safe to say procedures. So we'll be going through those in a minute. Multi-tier systems of support, MTSS, which we are currently engaged in with our district through our Focus Forward strategic plan, and PBIS. Again, something that is implemented in many of our schools, but not formally in all of our schools. Did I state that correctly, Dr. B. Coates? I just want to check. I don't want to misspeak.
Oh, I mean, I agree with you.
Okay, so we just highlighted these, that they are optional. They're not required. The first 4 are required trainings annually for a threat assessment team. And then working with Mr. Ricard, we decided that it makes more sense to have one threat assessment team for the district, because many of the people who are already on these teams are already on intervention teams and SAP teams. And so they're on many different teams that do similar work. And so really what we were thinking is to have one threat assessment team for the whole district, since every school has its, go ahead.
No, I was just saying that team, just so that the board is clear, will need to be identified.
Yes.
Because that's not currently in place.
Correct.
We're working on that process right now.
So I just had one question. Is it possible that you can give us a scenario or an example of how this policy, once it's put in place, how would it look? Or give us an example of what we have, when we would have to use it, or, just so we can get an idea.
So it would be, well, one of the I like that question. If we had a student, one who is really ready to create some type of harm to themselves, and one of their friends knew about this situation, and they told an individual, like a counselor or somebody, and the counselor would call down, and we would we would take the student and ask several questions relating to the situation, and we would break it down, and that's where the threat assessment team members will come into play, by identifying and responding to the intervening threat.
Did that answer the question, Ms. Boykins?
Yes, I was trying to come off of mute. Thank you very much. So it's more so preventative, not waiting for something to happen.
Correct. It's preventative and it's reaction as well. So if we do have a student who exhibited some behaviors, like if they were to call in a bomb threat or something like that severe, that we would be able to identify who the child is and go into action on, first of all, addressing the threat from a safety perspective, and then of course, addressing the child's behavior to find out, why is this child doing this? What is going on here? And what interventions are needed in order to support that child?
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Ms. Stewart, we got Ms. Hoff that has a question.
Oh, Ms. Hoff.
Even though her hand is blurry, we can't see her hand.
I was trying to move it to my face.
I really didn't see it either. So thank you for putting it out.
Right now, thank you, Ms. Hopkins. Right now, we're using different teams in different schools. Is that the case?
Well, each school has an intervention team, which they meet, on different days. Some meet on Mondays, some meet on Fridays. So that's a constant in our district right now. Many of the people who are on those intervention teams are the same people that we would have on the SAP team, that we would have on this one, our counselors, our social workers, those intervention staff that exist at the school level.
Right. So, but isn't there a safe to say intervention team?
That is not currently in place. No.
But there is supposed to be a safe to say intervention team.
Yes.
You are correct. And that's where we're going to be going with that procedure.
Okay. And so right now, if a safe to say tip comes in, where does it go? To you, Ms. Stewart?
It would come to me, or it would go to Mr. Ricards, I'm sorry. And right now we do have a system in place. It's called Safe Mail. So that when we do get those reports in of anything, inappropriate email to suicide thoughts or ideations or a threat of fight, those all come to me, Miss Brown and Mr. Ricards, and we,
Right,
the
but-
three of us work on it together.
Right, but the safe to say tip line is completely different than that.
That is correct.
Okay, because I know at one time we did have a safe to say team. At one time, I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong. And I took a course through the district called Mental Health 911. And it was sort of about dealing with mental health in an emergent way. And that might be the wrong name. I could look it up, but is that mandatory for our teams?
Well,
I think we have to look that up, the research.
yeah, we're gonna have to look that one
Alright,
up.
you cannot get with the social worker in the high school, because I took it when Frank Bruno was here. And I really believe it teaches us to deal with mental health in a very similar fashion to a 911 call. And not sending the wrong people to the scene.
Oh, so more like crisis intervention? Like when
Yeah,
it's
but it
happening
was,
in the moment?
yeah. Yeah, but it was, I'll get the name of it for you.
Okay, I'd appreciate that.
Marissa would know. But I'll ask her.
Okay. All right, does anybody else have any?
Yes, I have a question, Danielle.
Ma'am.
What part does the local law enforcement play in this training? Are they reached out? Do you reach out to them for some type of input in this training period?
It depends on the cases and the severity of it. If it's a suicide, anything relating to death or something tragic, absolutely. Other than that, we handle it in-house.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Yes, the training that is deemed optional, when will we determine which one of these will be a part of what we do as opposed to optional?
Well, if we include it in our policy, it will not be optional anymore. So what PSBA has suggested and said is that these last things are optional options for you as a district to choose to add to your list of requirements. So if you have any suggestions on what we should keep or what you think strongly we should have, please tell us.
So I'm for the whole meal.
Okay.
But
Okay.
I also want to be conscientious of what's realistic. So
Yeah.
I don't want us to bite off something that we can't follow through on. So that's what my reasoning for the question.
So
Okay.
my suggestion is going to be that we, I think, come back and maybe bring this policy back as well in October with recommendations on the list of items that we would include out of the 6 that are optional. I do want staff to weigh in, and then I think we need to also weigh in on cost to implement and then timing, because we only have so many hours in a day, as well as so many professional development days during the year. So we just really need to be realistic. And I agree with you, Mrs. Henry. You know, some of these are very, very important, and some of it, it's like you have to spend the money because it's worth providing the training versus not having people train and then have to deal with the issue. So I just think it would benefit us to have some conversations with some staff people about these 6 items. Is that okay?
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
Perfect. Thank you. Any other comments, questions on this section before I move on? Okay. Information for students, parents.
Yes.
Go ahead,
The information for students and parents and guardians and staff, the district should annually notify students and staff and parents on a regular basis. The threat assessment teams shall make available age-appropriate information material, which is very important. And the threat assessment team shall make informational material for school employees regarding the recognition and threatening at risk behavior. The district shall, the district shall annually provide mandatory training. That's what we were just talking about, the mandatory training. The SSOs have mandatory training as well, and they go through an Act 67, which was a 40-hour training that they all just, it was accredited training and also certified training they had to test out on. And a lot of that provided with trauma informed and say school activities, customer service, a slew of information that was provided for them during that week.
Does anybody have any questions on this section, information to our district stakeholders?
How do we educate and train folks that come middle of the year? And, you know, do we have to create an onboarding policy to not, you know, to catch folks up? Because it's all good if you start the year with us, right? You get all that PD. But if you come in the middle of the year, how do I know you even know anything?
Well, from the school SSOs, I have a training manual for them when they enter. Like right now, I have 2 new SSOs that will be going through the training. They will do this on PD days. And also when they have downtime, they will do some of the webinars that are provided.
Yeah, I guess my point is that they should be doing it before they even enter a building. Because, you know, the next PD day is until October. So they're working 30 days with no training on how to deal with youth and all these really, really important topics.
So right now, what I have them doing, well, my first new hire is shadowing the SSOs. He's not to really engage fully like the rest of the SSOs. That's right now the requirement. I like that ideal that you have, and we need to put that probably in some type of document stating that you must have this type of training before you're hired.
Yeah, or at least like a short, like I don't expect at $15 for an hour for them to come trained in what we need them to know, but we have to have some way of onboarding them so they know, you know, at some level what we need them to know before they engage with our students, right? How to restrain, if that's a thing, you know, whatever it is, you know, when we call the police, when we don't call the police, you know, identifying suicide ideation, whatever the case.
Well, I have a training manual that I do give them to read.
Right.
To
It
help
may get
support.
read like our student handbook.
Right.
So the point is well taken. And so that'll be something that we'll have to add in and consider for our procedures. And look at it from an onboarding standpoint as well. So we'll have to connect with HR on that piece as well.
Thank you.
All righty.
Also, Mr. Rickards, I was just going to say also, what you could do is have a refresher. So the new people wouldn't miss it. So for instance, you could have a yearly refresher that goes on every year, which would give you the ability to catch those newcomers. So that would be a way so you won't forget, hey, we have a yearly refresher, and they always can be able to attend those meetings to ensure that they got the proper training. That's a suggestion.
That's a great suggestion, Monique, and that's what I do. Most of our trainings are 2-year trainings, and I do have that refresher on that following year coming up. Like I have one in this new school year coming up. I have a lot of those trainings coming about. So that is a great point, and I am utilizing that.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any other comments? Okay, hearing none, we'll continue on to reporting and identification.
All right, reporting and identification. The threat assessment team shall report all documents and respond to the reports received regarding threat assessments.
Mhm.
Threat assessments responding to reports. System service that's providing all that information to us and we're responding to it accordingly. I'm having technical issues here. Dave, can you go back a little bit, please?
Yeah, sure.
That's great. Okay, threat assessment team shall assuring the responsibility reports. When the threat assessment team has made preliminary determinations, that's very important, that will indicate the safety of students. Notify the superintendent designated school safety supervisor. You can scroll down. Thank you. When reports of students will indicate the behavior that's imminent threat, that's so important that they must report that. So basically it's really relying on other friends of students to report if they see their friends acting up in a certain way, to report to somebody and let them know so that we can provide these services to help that one student. While the threat assessment team members was reasonable cause to suspect that a reported situation indicates there may be a victim cause of child abuse. And that's where we rely on the counselors in accordance to the law and board policies.
So does anybody have any questions about this particular section on reporting and identification? No? Okay, hearing none. Inquiry and assessment.
The inquiry and assessment is investigating, assessing, and responding to threat reports to the threat assessment team. Discrimination, titles 9, sexual harassment, bullying, cyberbullying, suicide awareness, prevention and response, hazing and dating violence. Remember, the threat assessment team shall engage in assessment of the reported student and behavior to indicate the threats. Interviewing students and other staff, to parents or other regarding the subjects and reported threats. Reviewing the existing academics, the health, conducting searches and lockers with our principals, and sometimes we have to have local law enforcement involved with that if there are drugs involved or a weapon involved. Examining the outside sources, juvenile probation, community agencies. When appropriately, convening an appropriate team to assess and address a situation subjects. The individual education program, also known as the IEP team. The threat assessment team shall establish and implement procedures, which is what we're working on very hard with our local police department. And that becomes we also have a memorandum of understanding with all our local PDs, which have been signed and approved. Threat assessment team may request the county agency juvenile probation department to consult and cooperate with the team as well. When the assessment of a student's behavior determines it's not a threat, an intervention team or the MTS team, the Students Assistance Program IEP, will give that information out. Does anybody have any questions about that section?
Yes, Mr. Rickards, I do. It's Mrs. Hopkins. So
Hi, Ms. Hopkins.
hey, honey, hi. My question is, so no, let me start off with my comment first. My comment is, I'm so glad that your team, your department is really working with our local police department. I hear so much wonderful news about the relationship that we are engaging and that we are, meeting with our local police departments. Is really, really, how can I say, just really enlightening and really enriching to know that this is where the steps that you and your office is taking, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
My question to you is on, I lost it.
Was it higher up?
No. It should be right where, I think it was about the police department, where the police department. Anyway, you know what? There it is. The threat assessment team may request that the county agency or juvenile probation department we don't have in Delaware County a juvenile probation department. Who are we reaching out to now?
I'll have to research that question out. That's a good question. And I will definitely get back to you as soon as I find the answer to that.
Okay,
Thank you for
Thank
that
you.
question, for clearing.
thank you.
I had a question. Do we have an MOU with our police right now?
Yes, we do.
Um,
And they get signed every 2 years. And it was signed last year.
okay, great. Could, in the future, the board see it, just to understand,
Yes, definitely.
just in an upcoming packet or something?
Yes. And our local chiefs, we met with our local chiefs and we had a very good discussion. Dr. B. Coates, Ms. Seward, myself, Jeff, we had such a great discussion of coming together with our local PDs. And it was really good and they're understanding, we understand what their needs are, they understand what our needs are. And they're really willing to work with us to keep everyone safe. And I see it all the time when I'm out and about. They always stop me. They call me all the time when it's a problem. And it's just a great situation. It's become really good. We're very happy on it.
All right. Does anybody else have any input on this section? All right, hearing none, I'm going to move to response and intervention.
Our response and intervention with the threat assessment team shall develop
Sorry.
posing a threat and a student management plan for each student identified and assess the posing threat to students. Following the notification of students' parents, guardian, and threat assessment team may refer to the student's appropriate program. Can you move down a little bit?
Oh, sorry.
No, you're fine.
The band is throwing me off. I'm not sure if you can hear it. They're like right there.
Yes, they are.
When we get the referrals from the student assistant programs, the referral is appropriate for the law enforcement agency. We give that information to them. It's an appropriate evaluation to determine whether a student is qualified student with a disability in the need of the Section 504 service agreement. And it's also the IEP in accordance. A referral to the student's IEP team and a review and address the student's IEP positive behavior support plan. A referral to the student Section 514 review, address the student's 504 plan as a positive behavior support plan. With prior parental consent, the referral into behavior services provided, health and care. And addressing the behavior, ongoing monitoring, taking steps to address the safety and potential targets. School safety incident reporting for safe schools. The term incident means incident involving the act of violence, the drugs, devices, cosmetic acts, as a possession or sale of alcohol or tobacco. When related to the threats, it also meets the definition of an incident under the Safe Schools Act. The superintendent or designee shall notify the parent and guardian if not previously notified by the district staff. Students with disability. Anybody have any question with that last section?
Okay, moving on.
Moving on.
Student with disability.
Say again.
I'm sorry, student with disability.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, student with a disability when reporting an incident committed by a student with a disability and referring to students, disability with the law enforcement agency. The district shall ensure the compliance with the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act. Monitoring and management. If a student has an individual management plan, the threat assessment team shall monitor that individual management plan. The threat assessment team is in coordination with other appropriate teams. The support shall determine when the student's individual management plan is no longer needed for disposition of the threat. So that's saying if the threat is not, if it's not an immediate threat of life or death, it's a non-management plan. And if it will follow the regulations of the school, of the board of policies.
So I wanted just to note that we also had our social workers review this policy as well, as it involves a lot of the work that they already do. So this is just a question that Nicole Heileman had when she reviewed it. And the answer to the question is, if it's a certain, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was, excuse me, I had to go. I'm sorry.
Okay, that the answer to the question is if we determine that by the threat assessment team that the student it's not a threat, then we would transfer it to whatever the applicable team is that supports the student. So whether it be the intervention team, the IEP team, the 504 team that Mr. Ricards talked about up further up in the document.
Thank you, Danielle, for clearing that.
Who's the leader of the individual management plan?
Who's the leader of the individual management
Like
plan?
who writes the plan? Who implements the plan? Who oversees the plan?
Now, what I believe it would be the threat assessment team.
Okay.
That's like one of the duties of the team.
So can we research that to get a conclusive answer for that?
I'm gonna put that in there.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry.
Right, it says it in there, it's the threat assessment team that writes it. And like the whole point of that section was, again, if after evaluating the whole situation, they determine that it's not at that level of threat, then it is transferred to whatever applicable group is supporting the student.
Right, but if it is at that level, then the threat assessment team has a active case that, you know, depending on where that student sits, we may or may not be close to them. Right, if we just have one team, they could get a little busy. Right, so.
Got it. Okay. Any other questions about this section? Okay. As the horns are blaring outside of my window.
It records access and confidentiality in order to carry out the duties and facilitate the timely assessments of the intervention of students' behavior, which will be student health records, prior school disciplinary records, other records of information that may be relevant or relating to the threat, and determining the treatment and referral options that are maintained by the district. The threat assessment team shall use information records to obtain and fulfilling the team's duty. The threat assessment team shall maintain confidentiality and handle all student records, which is very important. And I really stress that with my SSOs on confidentiality. That's very important. And it also stressed it in the Act 67 training that they had. Threat assessment members whose other assignments and roles require confidentiality specific student communication in accordance with the law. Does anybody have any questions on that I can help clear out?
Okay, hearing none. Annual board report.
Threat assessment team shall provide and require information to the superintendent and consult with the school safety and security coordinator, which would be myself. The total number of threats assessed, and we will enter that. We will track that by Navigate 360 as a summary of interaction with outside law enforcement agencies. We're taking the juvenile probations out of there, and behavioral service providers. The assessment of district threat assessment team's operation, recommendations for improvement, which Jennifer just spoke on, and the additional information required by the superintendent and designate. The annual threat assessment report. Can you go back down just a little?
Oh, sorry.
That's right there. The annual threat assessment report shall be present in the annual report to the school board and school safety and security coordinator. Okay, I'm good. Threat assessment team information addressing verification of compliance with law and regulations. And then additional information required by the superintendent designee shall include school safety and security coordinator.
So when does that annual report to the board take place? because I think it's been a minute since we've had one. Unless I missed it. Because I remember Danielle, you and I going back and forth on that issue.
So this would be the threat assessment team report, and as this is a new initiative, we haven't determined that, but I think that's something that we'll go back and determine when would be the appropriate time to report back to the board.
So I'm talking, because I was actually just looking at it today. I was looking for another email to you. The pay survey maybe needs to be reported.
Or
to
is it the threat assess, I'm sorry.
It says, as per Act
Or building.
44, the school board is supposed to get an annual report on school safety measures.
So would that be in the beginning of the school year?
We're supposed to get the report by June 30th.
By June 3rd?
And it says it should be presented in executive session. Because it would, contain.
So this will be part of that report on June 30th.
Yeah, I'm not clear, but I learned about it during my mandated PSBA training. That's
Okay.
I emailed you. I'm gonna forward this old email to you then, Ms. Seward.
Thanks, I appreciate it. Okay. Before, okay. Okay. All righty. Any other questions, comments on this section? This was a very meaty section.
Yeah.
Okay.
Information.
Okay, any other on this policy as a whole before I go to the next? All right, thank you. Now the next one, emergency preparedness and response. And here we see the safe to say procedures that were suggested by the PSBA as well. These are new procedures, by the way. There were a small amount of updated language and additional guidance in this particular policy. I'm sorry, oops. There we go. So let me increase this one. Can everybody see that okay? All righty, so.
So the purpose of this is the board recognizes the responsibilities of the safety of our schools, of our students and staff and visitors. The authority that we use is Emergency Management Agency, Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency, to develop and implement comprehensive disaster response preparedness. The definition of school safety drill, the school safety assessments. The superintendent is a designee shall report to the relevant stakeholders, including parents, community agency and local law. It's an annual before April 10th. The superintendent shall certify the emergency evacuation drills and school safety drills conducted manually to describe in accordance to the state law and regulations. The board directs the school safety and security supervisor periodically to complete the school safety and security assessment. And the guidelines. Does anybody have any questions before we move on to guidelines?
Thank you, Jennifer. No, hearing none?
No, I was no.
All righty, guidelines?
The guidelines of emergency planning, and emergency preparedness plan shall be accessible in each district building and be reviewed at least annually. And the appropriate information regarding emergency preparedness plan annually by September 30th, the district shall assemble information required to assist the local police and the department and required the information shall be deployed immediately to the incident command post in an event of an emergency or disaster. Schools, school buses and transportation vehicles owned and leased available to the local county and state officials for emergency planning exercises. That will be our bus drills that the buses, they have to perform the bus drills twice a year. And their bus drills, I'm getting a date on them. I should have a date for them soon. And I will definitely put that in the report.
All right. Here's some new language here that was added in this section.
The district shall make provisions in the emergency preparedness plan
Mhm.
and any applicable health and safety plan for the continually
For the continuity.
continuity, I'm sorry, continuity of the student learning during the school closing and excessive of absence in accordance with the law.
I thought I was the one that was going to be coughing throughout this.
Jeez, I
All
haven't
right.
talked this much in a long time.
And this was language that was replaced from our
Everything-
policies.
I'm sorry, everything that is struck in red, it was replaced in the blue for school staff on school safety and security. And the standards specified by the state school safety and security committee.
And then they added requirements around trainings.
Which some of the requirements around the training are 2 hours addressing any combination, 1 hour or more shall be completed each year in person or virtually. The suicide awareness, trauma enforced, behavioral health. Many of these were covered for the SSOs in the Act 67 class that they tested out on, they all passed. 1 hour of training in the following areas, which shall be completed each year. And the training must be conducted in person. That would be our active shooter training, bombs threat. We have bomb threats, natural disasters, which comes in the school safety security drill. Other individual school facilities on the community. This training may be conducted in person or virtually. The required school safety and security training shall be credited towards the professional education requirements in accordance with law and the district professional education plan.
Does anybody have any questions about this particular section before we move on? Okay, hearing none. The rest,
Required drills, emergency preparedness drill, fire drills, school security drills. The school security drills may take place in place of a fire drill for a month in which it is conducted. The superintendent designee shall conduct an additional school safety drill in the district after the first 90 days. The superintendent oversees instruction and trainings, notifies and requests assistance from the local law enforcement. That means I will call in the police to help support this training when we have this. And also with the bus evacuation drills, the local PD will be on presence when they have these drills. You can scroll down there.
What's a school safety drill?
It's an emergency drill, if we have an earthquake or any type of hurricane, natural weather disaster, things of that nature, what would happen, they would shelter in place in the building. And it's coincidental that you spoke about that because I had the first students manager down today and we were discussing that. Like if it was some type of disaster outside, what would they do? Would they pull off or would they? I told them what they should do is get off the bus and get into the building to shelter in place. I don't feel as though the bus is the most safest place for them, especially if you're just parked out front. But if you're on the street, then I would remain in the bus.
So is it a school safety drill or a school security drill? Are they the same
It's a
thing?
security drill, school security drill.
And that's environmental in nature.
Yes.
Should we add that to our policies so folks reading it understand?
alrighty, now where would I be putting that? Let me see.
It's just a
Security drills.
Security drill, yeah.
So we're adding, oh, you know what, I'll put it here. We're adding language about, we're adding language about
It's an environmental.
environmental.
Yeah, if I looked at that, I might think it's active shooter training or something like that.
I mean, it falls underneath a lot of
Yeah.
different circumstances. I just don't want to put environmental on it. I think we should leave it a little more broad because it
That's
could be.
fine, that's fine. I just,
Okay,
I would
We
want
can do
to,
a such as environmental,
Right.
you know, we can give examples. Okay. Point taken.
And we should get some clarity if there is, so for instance, a flood, right?
Mhm.
You think about the high school, that Green Avenue corner and a flood. Are we getting the kids off the bus into the building, or are we putting them on the bus, getting them out of Dodge?
No, I
Right.
think we will call our local fire department and have them evacuated off the bus. We don't have them jumping off the bus and then raging water or any floods. We don't know what's in the water, so I think I would keep them on the bus, just for their safe protection.
Right.
I just had a quick question. Is it called the school security plan or the school safety plan?
It's a school security drill. It's not
I mean, yeah, drill. So it's security drill, not safety drill. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
All right, any other questions for this section? Okay, hearing none. Here we go. Safe to Say Something program. There's additional language here.
Yes.
Mr. Ricard, you.
Oh, okay. Yes. In the court, the board directs the superintendent designate to develop the procedures for assuming the responsibility in accordance with the law. The procedure shall establish the framework around Safe to Say program in accordance with applicable law and board policy and administrative regulations.
Okay.
Note, school entities who receive special funding, federal funding, grants, readiness, and emergency management may also have additional requirements in compliance with this national incident.
Now, for this particular part, Safe to Say, there is also procedures. These are brand new. These are from PSBA. Now, this document is 20 pages long. So has anybody had like any overall questions about this procedure? No, I'm not hearing any. Because this is really the document that we would be using to create that infrastructure for how we're implementing it. So like this is just the guiding, our guidebook here.
Guide tools.
But Danielle, just to make sure that I'm clear, the board typically approves a policy, not procedures.
That is correct, sir.
And we do have procedures in place, and they're called administrative procedures for every policy. So while we would share this information, it would not be something that the board would actually take action on, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's how
That is
we have
correct.
done previous procedures, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, sir. You are absolutely correct. And I actually am very grateful to PSBA for creating this, because this gives us a great guiding framework for how we should be implementing this program. So does anybody have any questions about policy 805? And Safe to Say procedures. Okay, now I'll go to our last one, school security personnel, 805.2. The overall policy changes that have been added to this one is around what we should do around our staffing in our security personnel department. Mr. Rickards, would you like to guide us through the changes?
Yes, definitely. When a vacancy occurs in the role of a school safety security supervisor, the superintendent shall appoint another school administrator to serve as school safety security supervisor within the 30 days and shall notify the board regarding the appointment. The superintendent or designee shall submit the name, contact information for the appointed school safety security supervisor to the state school safety and security committee within the 30 days of the appointment.
Does anybody have any questions about that new language that was added? Okay.
I don't have a question, but it indicates that we have a short time period
Very short.
to put somebody else in place. So I just share that because we do have a administrative interview protocol or process that we follow. So I just bring this up because I'm not sure if this would supersede that. And my initial thought is it would. So just depending upon when the person leaves and appointing someone, it may just look or feel a little different. So I just wanted to make sure that that was stated.
Okay, let's be
So this can be done without going through the hiring hiring process through the personnel department? Is that what it's stating?
No, this would have to be somebody who is onboarded to our district as a full-time employee and or promoted from within. If we had somebody within that would be promoted to this position, it would still have to go through the HR process.
No, but this says that the vacancy has to be filled by another school administrator within 30 days. And the hiring process of a non-interim would be after that. Is that correct?
That's the way that I read this. That's why I made the
So
statement
this is interim.
about this policy could supersede our HR protocol that we have for hiring administrators, because this person would be an administrator.
Well, and it's funny, Dr. because I read it as another school administrator within our organization needs to be appointed to the job within 30 days.
But it doesn't. Yeah, and I don't read it as in our organization. I think if that was meant, I think it would have been stated, because you can be a school administrator and not be in our organization.
Mhm.
And
Sorry.
Mr. Ricard,
I read it as superseding what HR, hire.
You said you don't, or you do, Mr. Weller?
You read it that way.
Right, you're right. And that was my same read on it. I think we can get more clarification on this one, but that's the way I read it. And I only say may because it all depends upon the timing, right? So we may be able to post something, somebody interview, get appointed, but typically if it's somebody that's coming from outside, and they may be a school administrator, they may not be able to obtain or fill the position within 30 days. I just don't know if the 30-day time period is realistic. We may just need to get clarification on this wording, Danielle.
And
And
got it.
Mr. Rickards, that's your position?
Yes.
Well, you're not going anywhere. So.
No,
Gary is not allowed to go anywhere.
I'm not planning on that at all.
It's interesting that rule applies to that position. Does it apply to a superintendent or a direct? Like, why they pick that one? They're all very important.
Well, I think the School Safety and Security Committee is the ones that added this language to the rules and regulations for safe schools. And so that's why this policy is coming out with this new language.
Interesting.
So I'll continue on.
Yeah.
All righty. So there is new language in number 3, around training.
Okay, bullying awareness, substance use awareness, the identification and recognition of the student's behavior that may indicate a threat to the safety of the student or other students, school employees, other individuals, school facilities, or the community in accordance with the standards established by the state's School and Safety and Security Committee and requirements of applicable law and regulations. Applicable, I'm sorry.
So this is similar language to what we just read in our threat assessment policy. So they're bringing alignment with that. Any questions about this new language? Okay, hearing none, I will move forward.
Right there, coordinate school safety and security assessment, school safety and security grants requirements. The school safety and security supervisor shall, within 1 year of its appointment, complete the required training as specified by the state school safety and security committee for serving in the role of school safety and security coordinator. This training shall be in addition to other trainings requirements for the school administrators.
So new training requirement for Gary.
Yes. That's going to be the Act 55 training as well.
Anybody have any questions about this new language?
Did they provide in this new document a list of qualifications for a school safety and security supervisor?
Not really. But they did include like different things that the safety and security supervisor are tasked with and in charge of. Their duties, if you will. I believe that that may be
Yes.
further down.
Got it.
Gary, do you recall if
Yeah.
it's, yeah, okay.
No, it's just what the duties that are asked,
Mm-hmm.
too much of the requirements.
Mhm.
In the past year, and additional information on threat assessments required by the superintendent or designee in accordance to the board policy. And we can scroll down.
Yep, all this stays.
Yes, it's all the same.
Oh.
Select options below the appropriate corresponding language.
Which we have.
That's school.
So
safety.
here we go. They
Yes.
give a definition for the officer.
An individual employed by the district or a third-party vendor, independent contractor, background checks. Prior to receiving an offer of employment, all school security guards shall comply with the requirements for background checks, certifications, and employment history reviews for all school employees in accordance with the applicable law, board policy, and administrative requirements. These requirements are addressed separately in the board policy 304 for school security guards. The district shall conduct a law enforcement agency background investigation for following. Oh, wait a minute, sorry. It's a background investigation in compliance with the applicable law and regulations for school security guards. The district.
Which is a part of our normal onboarding process right now.
They review the background investigation, conduct all security guards, employment, independent contractors, third-party vendors. Following an offer of employment, the district shall request the separation records for a school security guard employed or contracted by the district in accordance with the applicable law and regulations for law enforcement agencies.
That was a lot. So does anybody have any
Well,
questions
well-
about this section?
Does that mean that school safety officers need to be trained, fulfill certain training obligations before they come on the job? Like, are the, and
I would think it would just be like the background checks, certifications that are necessary that everybody needs.
but there's no training requirement.
No.
No.
And my question around the school and safety and security supervisor, in education, supervisor means some sort of piece of paper, depends on the role. Is that not applicable to a school and safety security supervisor?
I'm sorry, what section are you referring to?
I'm in, I'm on page, I'm just asking a question.
Oh, okay, all right.
It's not really, so because the word
Okay.
supervisor
Mm-hmm,
brings off bells and whistles for me in education land.
okay.
So that is why I asked the job requirement, because in education, a supervisor is credentialing, right?
Mhm.
Right, we've had this conversation, it denotes some sort of credentialing. Does that not apply to a safety and security supervisor? Like, are they really dividing the educational realm into, educators and then safety people?
Got it. All right. All right.
When you say coordinator, it doesn't mean, right, it doesn't mean much. It's that word supervisor in education that is
And
sort
it
of,
depends, Jennifer, because in previous roles in the school system, if you're a coordinator, you could be required.
Mhm.
So
yeah.
it's per, I guess, role. I hear the question, but
it's sort of written weird. It says the school and the school safety, this is on page 2 in the middle, all in blue.
Okay.
Supervisor shall within 1 year of appointment
Mhm.
complete the required timing as specified by the state's school and safety security committee for
Mhm.
serving in the role of a school and safety security coordinator. This training may be in addition, right? So they use supervisor and coordinator in the same, and I think they're talking about the same person.
Yeah, they are.
You know what I'm saying? Like how
They
it's
are.
But what they're saying is whatever this training is, not what your degree is. I guess that's what you were asking, but they're specifically asking for this specific training to have occurred within.
Within 1 year of
time.
hiring.
So it's not talking about what their background is.
No, I agree. It's just that they're using the word supervisor and coordinator.
Mhm.
Interchangeably. I see it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
right, and supervisor, I'm not talking about educational background, denotes some sort of training to me versus coordinator, so I just don't know what they're saying there.
Okay, I can get clarification from PSBA.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Thank you for that question. Oh, okay, so we're at here where you see safety coordinator again. I
Right?
knew it was coming.
The only place they use that word, supervisor, and then it's all coordinator, coordinator, coordinator.
I think that they're using it interchangeably, but again, I'll check with PSBA to clarify. Knew it was coming. Okay.
Bless you.
Yes, it is a cough. But thank you. So we were talking about the background checks.
Right, keep going, yes,
Keep going.
and the requirements,
And I added that.
yes.
And then they just added this line, requirements.
School
For
security
this.
guard, yeah.
Mhm.
School security guards shall provide all the trainings, assisting with disruptive students, monitoring visitors campus, coordination with law enforcement and official security functions that improve and maintain school safety.
Mhm.
Security, yeah.
So this part we just went through because it was replaced by language that was up at the top and it was taken out of the new policy.
Did I see somewhere in there it said about security officers with weapons? I think I saw the word weapons somewhere. Fact that.
Actually shouldn't have because
Oh.
so this part right here was, you see where it says applicable options and corresponding language to your school, your district security personnel. Well, below here, it had different, like an actual officer that is an actual police officer, or like on loan to us through a cooperative agreement, or a school resource officer, which is totally different, that carries weapons. But our staff are school safety officers that do not carry weapons.
I did see, I thought I saw the word weapons. It went by so fast.
Okay, I can search it and make sure that that's not in there because our folks do not use weapons.
I know, that's what I was
Yeah.
concerned about. I said, why am I seeing this in here?
Sure, it is not in the policy. Thank you for saying that. I will do a search and make sure it's not in here.
Okay, thank you.
All righty. And I think we're done because all this stuff actually was what was replaced at the top. So that was it. And this is just an additional note for you. I contacted PSBA just to kind of get a sense of when our updated policies through our PNN newsletters would be coming out. There really isn't a pattern to it, but I did find out there's going to be another one that will be coming out at the end of September. So I'm being a little eagle eye looking for that. But otherwise, I'll be working on a time frame with the rest of my colleagues, continuing through our 100s, 200s for this year. But we will be prioritizing any new policies that come out through PSBA's newsletter. So I just wanted to add that note so that you are aware. And with that, I turn it back over to Ms. Hopkins. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, for your patience. I know this was long. This is not our normal policy meeting, but thank you, everyone. Thank you for your feedback. Thank you for helping us get these policies updated. Ms. Stewart and Mr. Rickards and Mr. Cuff, appreciate you all and everything that you do today and this evening. Before we adjourn for this evening and see you all October 6th is our next meeting. Does anyone have any final questions or comments? I didn't miss anybody? Okay, good, thanks. So good night, everyone. Have a good one.
Good night.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.